She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She only said 4 words. "I don't need your advice." The room fell silent. A moment earlier, she had been smiling, relaxed, warm, almost impossible to dislike. Then someone politely pointed out a small mistake. Not an insult, not a public humiliation, just a simple correction. And in less than 2 seconds, her voice changed. Her eyes became colder. Her smile disappeared. The warmth was gone. It felt as though an entirely different person had taken her place. Have you ever witnessed a moment like that? Not an explosive argument, not someone losing control, just a tiny shift, so small that most people forget about it within minutes. But something inside you remembers, because your instincts noticed what your mind couldn't explain. Carl Jung spent decades studying moments exactly like this. He believed there are brief moments when the personality you've known for years suddenly cracks open. Not because people decide to reveal themselves, but because, for a fraction of a second, they can't stop themselves. And according to Jung, those tiny moments often reveal more about a person's true character than years of polite conversations. Most people believe character is revealed through grand actions, acts of courage, acts of kindness, big decisions. But Jung disagreed. He believed character is often exposed by something much smaller. The moment someone feels their image is threatened. Think about your own life. A coworker receives unexpected criticism. A friend is corrected in front of others. A family member is told, "I don't think you're right." Most of the time, the words themselves aren't painful. What hurts is what those words touch beneath the surface. You've probably seen it. Someone suddenly begins explaining far more than necessary. They interrupt before the other person finishes. Their tone becomes defensive. Their body stiffens. They smile, but it no longer reaches their eyes. It's almost invisible. Yet once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. Here's the strange part. The argument isn't what matters. The criticism isn't what matters. Even being right or wrong isn't what matters. The real story begins the instant their voice changes. Because that's the moment. Their carefully built identity starts fighting for survival. Jung believed every person carries 2 different selves. The one the world knows, and the one they spend their life trying to protect. Most of us never notice the difference, because the mask works, until one ordinary moment. When it doesn't, imagine a man everyone admires. He's calm, patient, always reasonable. People describe him as emotionally mature. One afternoon, during a meeting, a junior colleague quietly says, "I think there's a mistake in the numbers." Nothing dramatic. No accusation. Just one sentence. Within seconds, the man's face tightens. He laughs awkwardly. Then he explains why everyone else misunderstood. He blames the data. He blames the deadline. He even blames the software. Anything, except admitting he made a mistake. Most people leave that meeting thinking, he just doesn't like criticism. Jung would have seen something much deeper. He wouldn't ask, why did he become defensive? He would ask, what part of his identity just felt threatened? That single question changes everything. Because what you're witnessing isn't simply emotion. You're witnessing protection. Protection of a self-image that has taken years to build. And the stronger the protection, the more fragile the identity often becomes. This is why Jung warned us not to judge people only by their calm moments. Anyone can appear patient when life agrees with them. Anyone can seem confident when nothing challenges them. The real test begins the moment reality refuses to cooperate. Most people believe masks are easy to recognize. They imagine fake smiles, fake confidence, fake kindness. But the most convincing masks don't feel fake at all. The person wearing them often believes the mask is who they truly are, until one unexpected moment reveals otherwise. Jung gave this hidden psychological process a name, and once you understand it, you'll begin seeing it everywhere. In your workplace, in your relationships, even in your own family. But before we uncover that idea, there's something far more uncomfortable. Because if you've ever noticed your own voice becoming colder after someone questioned you, If you've ever felt an overwhelming need to explain yourself over something incredibly small, if you've ever defended an image instead of simply accepting a mistake, then this story isn't really about them. It's about you. And here's the disturbing part. If you're thinking, I've never done that, Jung would probably smile, because that's exactly how he knew. The mask was still doing its job. There is something strange about the human mind. When we truly dislike someone, we rarely stop talking about them. You tell yourself you're done. You say you don't care anymore. And yet, their name keeps finding its way back into your conversations. Almost without noticing, you bring them up again. The problem with him, she's always, I can't stand people like that. If someone recorded your conversations for a week, they could probably guess exactly who lives inside your mind, without ever meeting them. Carl Jung found that fascinating, because he believed the people who occupy your mind the most are not always the people who matter most. Sometimes, they're the people revealing the parts of yourself you've never met. Imagine a man named Daniel. Quiet, reliable, the kind of person everyone trusts. Every lunch break, his coworkers eventually hear the same name, Ryan. Daniel always has something to say about Ryan. He's so full of himself. He always needs attention. He thinks everyone is impressed by him. No one argues. Ryan really is confident, maybe even a little loud. But after a while, something starts feeling strange. Daniel isn't simply making observations anymore. He's collecting evidence. Every joke Ryan tells, every compliment Ryan receives, every time someone laughs at Ryan's stories, Daniel notices, almost as if his mind is searching for more reasons to dislike him. Now here's the question Jung would ask. Why Ryan? There are dozens of people in that office. Some are rude. Some are lazy. Some are dishonest. But Daniel hardly notices them. His attention keeps returning to one person, not because Ryan is the worst, but because Ryan touches something no one else does. Maybe years ago, Daniel learned that drawing attention to yourself was selfish. Maybe he was praised for being quiet, for being humble, for never taking up too much space. Little by little, he buried another version of himself, the version that wanted to speak first, to be noticed, to walk into a room without apologizing for existing. He buried it so deeply, he forgot it was ever there. Then one day, Ryan walked into the office, living exactly the life Daniel had forbidden himself to live. And without realizing it, Daniel began fighting a battle that Ryan didn't even know existed. This is what made Jung's insights so unsettling. The people who trigger our strongest emotions are often standing on the doorstep of something we've locked away inside ourselves. Not always, but far more often than we'd like to admit. So the next time one person's name refuses to leave your mind, don't ask, what's wrong with them? Ask something much harder. What part of me becomes uncomfortable every time they walk into the room? Because sometimes, the person you think you're watching is actually holding up a mirror. And here's what almost nobody notices. The moment you begin seeing other people's mirrors clearly, you become impossible to hide from yourself. If part of your character is revealed by the people you judge, the rest of it is revealed by 5 seconds you never planned for. Not 5 years, not 5 months, 5 seconds. Because there is one moment when almost every mask begins to lose its grip. It happens so quickly, most people never notice it. But once you do, you'll never stop seeing it. Imagine this. A woman has spent years building a reputation. She's calm, professional, thoughtful. People describe her with the same sentence. Nothing ever seems to bother her. One afternoon, she presents an idea during a meeting. She finishes speaking. The room is quiet. Then someone says, I don't think that'll work. That's all. No insult. No raised voice. No humiliation. Just one sentence. For about 2 seconds. Nothing happens. Then it begins. She laughs. But the laugh feels forced. She starts speaking faster. She interrupts before anyone else can finish. She explains things nobody questioned. She reminds everyone about her experience. She subtly points out mistakes other people made. By the end of the meeting, she has completely forgotten what the discussion was about. She's no longer protecting her idea. She's protecting herself. Carl Jung believed. This tiny transformation is one of the clearest windows into human character. Because the moment we feel our identity is threatened, our unconscious rushes in to defend it. Not because we're dishonest, not because we're evil, because we're afraid. Afraid that one mistake might destroy the person we've spent years trying to become. Here's what makes it even stranger. Two people can receive the exact same criticism in the same room, from the same person. One of them picks up their pen and writes something down, quietly, as if the criticism just handed them something useful. The other one is still talking 20 minutes later, explaining why the criticism was wrong. To someone who has already stopped listening, the criticism lasted 3 seconds. The reaction revealed 30 years. Jung believed this difference has very little to do with intelligence, or education, or success. It has everything to do with identity. The stronger you cling to an image of who you believe you must be, the more terrifying it becomes when reality refuses to support that image. That's why some people can't admit they're wrong. Not because they don't know the truth, because admitting the truth feels like losing themselves. Think about the last time someone corrected you. Not publicly, not cruelly, just honestly. What happened inside you? Before you spoke? Not what you said, what you felt. Did your chest tighten? Did your mind start searching for excuses? Did you immediately begin preparing your defense before the other person had even finished talking? That invisible reaction is far more important than the conversation itself. Because before your mouth answered, something much older answered first. Something that had been protecting you for years. Jung called that protective identity the persona. Most people believe the persona is a lie. It isn't. It's the version of yourself that learned how to survive. The successful one, the strong one, the agreeable one, the intelligent one, the person who never makes mistakes. The problem isn't wearing a persona. We all do. The problem begins when protecting the mask becomes more important than discovering who is wearing it. And here's the only question that matters. If one sentence can threaten everything you believe about yourself, what are you actually made of underneath? Because once you begin noticing those 5 seconds, you'll discover something even stranger. The people with the strongest masks are often the people who are exhausted from wearing them. And somewhere beneath that exhaustion is the person they've been hiding, even from themselves. After hearing all this, you might start believing something dangerous, that the people who lose their temper are the ones you should worry about. Carl Jung would probably disagree, because sometimes the most frightening masks are the ones that never seem to crack. Think about someone you've admired, always composed, always smiling, never emotional, never offended. Nothing seems to disturb them. You begin to think they're incredibly mature. But are they? Or have they simply become very good at hiding themselves? Jung spent years observing people who appeared perfectly balanced. Many of them weren't. They had simply become experts at performing emotional control. The anger never disappeared. The jealousy never disappeared. The fear never disappeared. It simply went underground. And what goes underground doesn't stop existing. It waits. Imagine a father who never raises his voice. His children describe him as calm. His neighbors admire his patience. His coworkers trust his professionalism. For 20 years, he never shouts, never argues, never complains. Everyone calls him emotionally strong. Then one ordinary evening, someone accidentally scratches his car. Within seconds, he explodes. Not with ordinary anger, with 20 years of anger. The people around him are shocked. This isn't like him. But Jung would say something very different. It has always been like him. You simply never saw it. Because what shocks us is rarely something new. It's usually something that has been hidden for a very long time. This is why the unconscious can feel so mysterious. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. One swallowed emotion, then another. One resentment quietly buried beneath a smile, then another, until eventually, something unbelievably small opens a door that has been under pressure for years. People often say, he changed. She became a different person. But sometimes, they didn't change at all. Sometimes, you simply met the person who had been living behind the mask all along. This is why Jung believed self-awareness is not about becoming someone new. It's about meeting the person who has quietly been waiting beneath your performance. And the meeting is rarely comfortable. And here's the mistake almost everyone makes. When they discover uncomfortable emotions inside themselves, they immediately try to get rid of them. The anger, the envy, the insecurity, the fear. But Jung warned that whatever you refuse to face doesn't disappear. It only finds another way to speak. Sometimes through your body. A tension that never quite leaves. A tiredness that sleep never fixes. Sometimes through the people. You cannot stop judging. The unconscious is patient. It can wait for years. Which means the question isn't whether your hidden self will eventually appear. The question is, who will be in control when it finally does? Because the greatest danger isn't having a shadow. The greatest danger is believing you don't have one. There is a silence that can change a person's life. Not the silence after an argument. Not the silence between strangers. A different kind of silence. The one that appears when you suddenly don't know how to defend yourself anymore. It usually begins with one simple question. Not a clever question. Not an aggressive one. Just an honest question. Imagine Daniel again. Weeks have passed. Ryan's name still appears in almost every conversation. The guy is exhausting. He always needs attention. I don't understand how people can't see through him. Then one afternoon, while the office is almost empty, an older coworker quietly asks, "Can I ask you something?" Daniel nods. The man takes a sip of his coffee. Then he says, "What if Ryan isn't the real reason you're so upset?" Nothing else. No lecture. No psychology. Just one sentence. Daniel laughs. A short laugh. Almost automatic. Then, something unusual happens. He doesn't answer. He looks down at the coffee in front of him. The room becomes strangely quiet. For the first time in weeks. Ryan's name isn't the loudest thing in the room. Daniel's thoughts are. Carl Jung believed. Moments like this are incredibly rare. Because most of the time, our minds move faster than our awareness. We explain. We justify. We defend. Not because we're lying. Because we've repeated the same story so many times. It feels impossible to imagine another one. But every once in a while, someone asks a question that slips past the story. Not by force, by curiosity. And suddenly, the explanation you've trusted for years begins to feel surprisingly fragile. Daniel doesn't become a different person that afternoon. He doesn't suddenly like Ryan. He doesn't walk away with all the answers. Something much smaller happens. On the drive home, he notices something. Ryan isn't replaying in his mind anymore. The question is, what if he isn't the real reason? That single sentence follows him home. It sits beside him at dinner. It returns while he's brushing his teeth. Not because it accuses him, because it refuses to leave him alone. Jung believed real change rarely begins with certainty. It begins when certainty starts to crack. Most people think growth feels inspiring. It doesn't. At first, it feels confusing. You no longer believe the old story completely, but you haven't discovered the new one yet. For a while, you live in between blame and understanding, between certainty and curiosity, between the person you've always believed you were and the person you're slowly beginning to meet. Very few people stay in that space. It's uncomfortable. The mind wants quick answers, quick enemies, quick explanations, anything except uncertainty. But Jung believed this uncomfortable space is where consciousness is born. Not when you finally understand yourself, but when you become willing to stop defending the version of yourself that no longer explains everything. Think about the conversation that stayed with you long after it ended. Not because someone won the argument, not because anyone raised their voice, because one quiet sentence kept echoing inside your mind for reasons you couldn't explain. Sometimes, those are the conversations that change the direction of your life. Not in a single day, but one thought at a time, one honest question at a time. one uncomfortable silence at a time. And perhaps that is why Jung believed the greatest obstacle to self-discovery isn't ignorance. It's the endless need to be right about who you think you are. Because the moment you stop defending the story, you finally become free to discover the person who has been waiting behind it all along. Most people think change happens the moment you discover the truth. Carl Jung didn't believe that, because discovering the truth and accepting it are two completely different things. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that conversation, not because it proved he was wrong, because for the first time, he wasn't completely sure he was right. For several days, he said nothing. Ryan's name almost disappeared from his conversations. Not intentionally, he simply noticed. He didn't feel the same urgency to talk about him anymore. Then, something unexpected happened. A week later, Ryan walked into another meeting. He laughed, told another story. People smiled. Exactly like before. Nothing about Ryan had changed. Only Daniel had. For a brief moment, he caught himself preparing the same old judgment. There he goes again. But this time, another thought interrupted it. Or, maybe that's just who he is. The judgment didn't disappear. It simply lost its certainty. Carl Jung believed this is one of the rarest moments in psychological growth. Not because your shadow disappears. It doesn't. Not because your persona falls away. It won't. But because something new appears between you and your automatic reaction. A pause. Just a few seconds. Almost invisible. Yet those few seconds can change an entire life. Most people never reach that pause. Not because they lack intelligence. Because certainty feels safer. It's easier to believe everyone else is the problem. It's easier to repeat the same story than to rewrite the one you've been telling yourself for years. Think about the last time you felt triggered by someone. Not a stranger. Someone you see regularly. Someone whose name appears in your mind, even when they're not in the room. Did you ask yourself what they were showing you? Or did you spend that energy building a better case against them? Most people choose the second option. Not because they're cruel. Because nobody ever taught them. There was another one. What is this trying to show me? That single question, asked honestly, changes the direction of your life. Not immediately. Sometimes the answer arrives weeks later. Sometimes years. But the question itself keeps a door open. That certainty would have closed forever. Daniel didn't become wiser overnight. He still caught himself judging. Still became defensive. Still felt jealous. Still wanted to be right. The difference was, he noticed it. And once you notice a pattern, it's surprisingly difficult to become completely unconscious again. Jung often suggested that awareness doesn't remove your darkness. It removes its ability to control you without your permission. That is the beginning of freedom. Not becoming perfect, becoming present. Because every unconscious reaction begins the same way. It says, this is about them. Consciousness begins the moment another voice quietly asks, are you sure? That tiny question has ended more inner battles than certainty ever could. And perhaps that is the greatest misunderstanding about personal growth. People imagine transformation as becoming someone new. Jung imagined something much quieter. You simply become harder to fool, especially by yourself. Because once you can recognize your own stories before they become your reality, you've crossed a line that very few people ever see. And on the other side of that line, the world looks exactly the same. The same people, the same conversations, the same ordinary moments. But you are no longer the same person, moving through them unconsciously. You are someone who sees, and seeing clearly, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you the story you've always told, is the only kind of freedom that no one can ever take from you. Something strange begins to happen when you stop fighting every battle inside your own mind. At first, almost nothing changes. You still wake up, go to work, talk to the same people, live the same life. From the outside, everything looks exactly the same. But then, someone says something that would have ruined your entire day 6 months ago. You hear it. You feel the familiar sting. For a split second, the old reaction begins to rise. The need to explain, to defend yourself, to prove them wrong. Then, it quietly fades. Not because you won, because you no longer need to. Carl Jung believed this is one of the first signs that consciousness is becoming stronger than habit. Your reactions don't disappear. They simply stop making every decision for you. Daniel noticed this before anyone else did. One afternoon, Ryan interrupted him during a meeting. Months earlier, Daniel would have spent the rest of the day replaying that moment. He would have told 3 different coworkers about it, gone home frustrated, built another story in his mind. This time, he simply continued speaking. The meeting ended. Everyone left. And for the first time, the conversation ended. Inside his own mind as well. That evening, something even stranger happened. Ryan walked past Daniel's desk, smiled, asked if he wanted to grab coffee tomorrow. Daniel almost laughed. Not because the invitation was funny, because for months, he had been fighting a war the other man never knew existed. Jung believed this happens more often than we realize. Many of the battles that consume us are invisible to everyone except ourselves. The person we resent goes home peacefully. The person we secretly compete with doesn't know a competition exists. The argument that keeps replaying in our minds ended for everyone else hours ago. Only we keep giving it another life. That is why Jung warned. The greatest prison is rarely built by other people. It's built by unconscious repetition. The same thoughts, the same interpretations, the same emotional habits. Repeated so often, they begin to feel like reality. But awareness interrupts repetition. And repetition is where suffering survives. Something else begins changing too. People start responding to you differently. Not because you've learned new techniques. Not because you've become more charismatic. Because your presence feels different. There is a kind of stillness in people who have stopped needing to win every moment. Others feel it immediately, even if they couldn't explain why. Some become more comfortable around you. Others become uncomfortable. Because when you stop participating in unconscious drama, the drama has nowhere to continue. And not everyone is ready for that. You have changed. Not because you've become a different person, because you've stopped asking the world to protect the identity you were afraid to lose. Jung believed real freedom doesn't begin when other people understand you. It begins when you no longer need them to, because the moment your peace stops depending on someone else's opinion, you've already escaped one of the oldest prisons the human mind has ever built. And once you experience that freedom, there is one final lesson that almost every person eventually discovers. The people you spent so much time trying to understand were never the greatest mystery. The greatest mystery was always the person looking back at you. Let's go back to where this journey began. A voice that suddenly changed. A smile that disappeared. A tiny reaction that lasted only a few seconds. At the beginning, it seemed like a story about someone else. Someone who became defensive. Someone who judged too much. Someone whose mask slipped. For just a moment. But somewhere along the way, the story quietly changed. Without realizing it, you stopped watching them, and you started recognizing yourself. Carl Jung believed this is the real purpose of psychology. Not to become an expert on other people, but to become honest about yourself. Because every person who has appeared in this story, Daniel, Ryan, the woman in the meeting, the father who suddenly exploded, they were never simply characters. They were possibilities. Possibilities that exist. Inside every human mind, there is a Daniel who quietly compares himself to others. There is a Ryan who longs to be seen. There is a frightened child who still believes making one mistake means losing love. And there is also a quieter self, the one that has been watching all along. Jung believed that observer is where real freedom begins. Not because it removes your fear, but because it keeps your fear from becoming your identity. Perhaps that is why becoming conscious feels so different from becoming successful. Success asks, how do I become more? Consciousness asks, what can I finally stop pretending to be? For most of our lives, we chase better masks, a better career, a better image, a stronger personality, more confidence, more approval, more certainty. Yet the strange thing is, the more perfect the mask becomes, the heavier it often feels, because someone has to keep wearing it. Jung spent his life reminding us that the goal was never to destroy the persona or to eliminate the shadow. The goal was to stop letting either one live your life without your awareness. That is what it means to become conscious, not perfect, conscious. It means catching yourself in the small moment before a feeling becomes a decision you can no longer take back. It means noticing the tiny pause between what happens and how you choose to respond. Most people never notice that pause. Their lives are lived from reaction to reaction, from habit to habit, from story to story, until one day they become the stories they've been repeating for years. But you don't have to, because awareness, however small, changes everything. Not all at once, not overnight. One conversation, one reaction, one uncomfortable truth at a time. Maybe tomorrow, something small will happen, something that shouldn't matter, but it will. And when it does, don't ask, how do I get rid of this feeling? Ask something gentler. Asterisk, what is this feeling trying to show me? Asterisk, that single question has the power to change the direction of an entire life, because every moment of awareness is another moment. Your unconscious no longer chooses for you. And perhaps that is what Carl Jung was trying to teach all along. Your greatest enemy was never your shadow. Your greatest prison was never your persona. It was the belief that you were only one of them. The day you realize you are the one who can observe them both is the day your real life begins. So the next time someone's voice suddenly changes, or someone cannot stop judging another person, don't rush to decide who they are. Pause. Look a little deeper. Then, have the courage to turn that same quiet attention toward yourself, because the most important character you will ever learn to understand isn't the person sitting across from you. It's the one who has been listening to this entire story, and perhaps, for the very first time, is finally ready to meet themselves